Chapter 4. By the time the two finally made it home the next evening, they were both exhausted from yet another useless doctor's visit. They'd spent half the day in the windowless waiting room, only to see a specialist who skimmed Autumn's chart, suggested a few tests they had already done, and offered zero solutions. The drive home was quiet. Once home, Claire angled her hip against the front door, shoving it open with the creak she had heard 1,000 times before. Holding Autumn's wheelchair in her other hand, she felt the cold evening wind swirl in behind them. Outside, the muddy sky promised another possible onslaught of wet snow. Claire guided the wheelchair over the threshold, wet boot prints trailing behind her. The warmth of the house was a relief, though the air still held that faint musty smell she could never fully banish. "Home again," Claire murmured, flipping on the overhead light. It buzzed, flickered, and then settled on a weak yellowish glow. "At least we beat the snow." Autumn nodded. Claire parked the wheelchair in the small living room, noticing the precarious tower of boxes. Boxes of crap that needed to be organized and this'd and that'd. Autumn tapped her own stomach, signing, "Tired, sick again," then frowned as if bracing for another vomiting fit. Claire winced at the memory of that morning, 30 minutes of retching that left Autumn pale and drained. "Maybe you should rest," she suggested softly. "We can do soup for dinner if you can stomach it, but let's take it slow." Autumn offered a half smile that seemed to take all of her strength, followed by her constant refrain, "Sorry." Claire's jaw clenched. No matter how many times she insisted it wasn't Autumn's fault, the apology always returned. "Stop that," Claire said gently, patting Autumn's shoulder. "You know it's not your doing." She forced a small smile herself. "Anyway, we're in for the night. Let's just breathe." She flicked her gaze to the corner of the living room, where that battered old phone lurked on a side table, once upon a time her mother's cherished landline, now a lifeline to doctors, lenders, or the boyfriend Claire tried to avoid. She swallowed and turned back to Autumn, pushing her toward the couch. "Enough gloom for 1 minute. Relax, I'll see what we have in the kitchen." She tried to sound upbeat, though her nerves still hummed from their tense afternoon. Autumn settled, breathing lightly. Her purple hair stuck to her reddish cheeks, slick with melted snow. Claire gently ruffled it aside, then turned towards the kitchen to hunt for anything that resembled dinner. She half expected the phone to ring right then, but the house stayed silent, the hush pressing in from the corners. She'd spent many hours on that phone, sometimes crying and pleading even. Her boyfriend Kyle would say how lucky Autumn is to have Claire, but what results have come from all her hard work and tears? Autumn hadn't gotten a diagnosis or effective treatment. Output matters so much more than input. Claire had failed for now, and for the past 2 years. She rummaged through a cupboard and stared at a can. So far, the meltdown of Autumn's health felt unstoppable, doctors shrugging them off or promising impossible wait times. The coil of anger in Claire's belly burned hot. A sudden ring from the phone made Claire jump, causing her to fumble the can of soup that somehow made its way into her hand. She cursed under her breath. Whatever. The phone rang again, the shrill sound punching through the kitchen's stale emptiness. "Better get it over with," she muttered. Every phone call these days felt like it could be more run around over referrals, scheduling errors, or half-lost chart notes. Her subconscious was already braced for bad news, that old familiar tension lurking in her chest. Claire picked up the receiver, forcing calm into her voice. "Hello?" A moment of static, then a clipped but polite female voice started. "Yes, Miss Blackwood? This is Tori from Seaview Neurology." Claire blinked. The name hit her gut like a jolt of electricity. The neurology clinic, the long-awaited appointment for Autumn, the one scheduled for tomorrow at 8 a.m. The hope they had clung to for almost a year. She dared to feel a flicker of optimism. "Oh, hi," she managed. "I was just about to... I have all our records ready for tomorrow. Are you missing something?" Tori took an audible breath, and Claire sensed the careful weight of a rehearsed statement. "I'm calling regarding that appointment. Our attending neurologists have reviewed the chart you provided. I'm afraid they have determined the case is too complex for our facility." Claire felt like her mind was instantly filled with radio static, and the volume was turned up to painful levels. It took all of her strength not to rip the phone from the wall and smash it onto the ground. She gripped the phone tighter. "Wait, what? We waited nearly a year for this. The referral took 4 months to get processed, and the actual scheduling took another 8, And you're telling me, she swallowed hard, throat tight, you're telling me this tonight, less than 24 hours before we're supposed to be there? What are we supposed to do? Just start over? The woman sighed as though reading from a script. We do apologize for the inconvenience. However, the doctors have decided the case is too complex for this facility. We recommend you see a referral elsewhere. Inconvenience? Claire echoed flatly. She felt heat flooding her cheeks, anger rising from her stomach to her throat. Her hands were shaking. You're canceling the night before? She lost the ability to walk and still hasn't seen a fucking neurologist. Her voice shook, half rage, half heartbreak. Tori's tone remained maddeningly calm. I understand you're upset. Please don't curse at me. You're welcome to contact your insurance provider or primary care doctor for alternative specialist options. Claire dug her nails into the can, holding back a scream. Don't you dare tell me how to talk when you call me up to give me this bullshit, she spat. You have no idea what it's like watching a young woman so sick she's bedridden for weeks at a time, and then we wait a year for an appointment and you give us this? Even in the depths of her blinding rage, she knew that too much cursing meant they'd hang up the phone. I'm truly sorry, Tori repeated, her voice trembling a bit. I wish you the best in finding a facility suited to her needs. If there's nothing else... Claire couldn't speak because she knew the only words that would come out would be a jumble of fucks and cunts. She slammed the phone down, hands shaking with adrenaline. For a moment she stood there, breathing hard, eyes burning. Too complex for our facility. The words replayed in her mind like a cruel echo. The appointment they had pinned their hopes on. How many times had she foolishly said, only so many days until you finally see a neurologist? God damn, that was stupid. She should know better by now. Her vision blurred. She seized a dish towel from the counter and wrung it, knuckles whitening. No wonder her subconscious kept telling her she was insufficient. The system itself confirmed it at every turn. You can't do this. You can't fix it. You can't get help. You can't save the person you love. Her heart hammered so fiercely she could barely steady her thoughts. Claire wanted to punch something. The neurologist felt so comfortable discarding them. She held her breath for a moment to confirm Autumn was in her bedroom, then allowed herself a burst of rage as she yanked the junk drawer out and threw it to the floor with a clash. She kicked the drawer across the room with all of her strength, and it dented the wall as its contents burst out in all directions. She could easily imagine the list of disclaimers read from a script. We apologize for any inconvenience. She wanted to laugh at the cruelty of the word inconvenience, as if Autumn's entire life was just that, an inconvenience doctors could pass along because it wasn't their problem. Nobody was responsible for her, as she was crushed beneath the rocks of the dispassionate, profit-driven garbage, and crushed slowly, suffocating. Unsure when the final rock would be laid down, at which point she would no longer be able to draw breath. Her chest heaved. She let the anger surge, waiting for it to crest. Calm down, she tried telling herself, but the words too complex burned in her mind. She thought of walking outside and kicking another dent into her Bronco or screaming at the empty street. Instead, she pressed her palm to her temple, closing her eyes until she steadied her breath. When she finally opened them, the can of soup lay forgotten on the counter. She turned off the stove burner she had left ignited, letting the metal cool. An echo from the other side of the house, Autumn calling her name. Claire clenched her jaw, failing to force her hands to stop shaking. We will handle this, she told herself. That's our only option. Claire called out in the calmest voice she could muster. Just a minute. Everything's okay. She noticed her phone had a notification. A new voicemail from her boyfriend, Kyle. She might as well listen. Claire, hey, the voicemail began. I guess you're ignoring me again. Look, I have needs too. You haven't answered any of my texts all day, and you know how I feel about being ignored. You said we'd talk more after last time, but you never called. I'm not trying to guilt trip you, but it's not fair to me either, you know. Hit me back, unless you're just too busy again. The recording ended. She pressed a hand to her forehead, and a memory sparked. They'd been on the floor of his cramped studio apartment, his Fleetwood Mac Rumors record playing, never going back again. He'd crouched over a pile of unopened textbooks, talking in circles about how he'd let his father down by dropping out of community college. I just never finished anything, he'd said, voice shaking. Always a disappointment. What if that's all I'll ever be? He wouldn't look at her at first, just kept playing with his multi-tool. She remembered gently laying a hand over his, feeling the cool metal press into her palm. You don't have to prove anything. she'd whispered, not sure if it was true. But the softness in his eyes then, the vulnerability, had made her heart ache. She kissed him in that moment, convinced she could be the anchor he needed. They'd ended up laughing at midnight, sifting through those books, joking that one day he'd open his own garage. Then I'll show him, he'd mumbled, half broken but determined. She thought, this is who Kyle really is, just a scared kid who wants to matter. Her chest felt tight now, remembering how intimacy had come so easily when his guard dropped. Even the good memories with him were still about him. She shut her eyes against the sting of tears. Fucking great, she thought. He's such a baby. The world just revolves around baby Kyle and his gentle ego. She tossed her phone onto the counter, then stomped to the door, flung on her jacket, and pushed outside into the raw cold. A biting wind slapped her cheeks red, but she welcomed the sting. It matched the fury in her chest. She spotted her battered white Bronco in the driveway, the same one that gave them trouble daily. The same old tank that served as a lifeline for errands, doctor's visits, and cemetery runs. She marched towards it, adrenaline spiking. Kyle's voice echoed in her mind. I have needs too. As if she had time to coddle him when her entire life was a triage of medical nightmares, unpaid bills, and a disappointment murdering hope. She allowed another wave of anger to well up. She lifted her boot and kicked the Bronco's side. The metal groaned, a dull thud reverberating through her foot. It smarted, but she kicked again, panting through clenched teeth. Claire half expected a neighbor to pop out, but the street was eerily still, heavy wet snow drifting in the faint glow of a street lamp. Her breath came in ragged puffs. She let out a laugh, laced with despair. God damn it, she said, bracing a hand on the Bronco's cold flank. No one answered. The wind tugged at her jacket, and she hugged herself, boots crunching in the half-frozen slush. She stood there until her cheeks turned numb, letting the fury dissipate into a raw ache. Slowly, she realized she left Autumn alone inside and probably worried. I'm sorry, she whispered to her hulking metal beast. She rubbed the Bronco's side where she had kicked it, a pointless gesture. Then she made her way back to the front door, eyes stinging from wind and frustration. Inside, the warmth hit her like a heavy blanket. She stripped off her jacket, breath heaving. Autumn stared from the living room, her expression concerned. She signed, What's wrong? Claire explained the appointment cancellation. Autumn's face fell. She shook her head, forming an exhausted sign that read something like, unfair, unbelievable. Claire sank onto the couch, burying her face in her hands for a moment. She felt Autumn's gentle touch on her shoulder. Peeking up, she saw genuine sympathy in her friend's eyes. Autumn typed onto her speech assistant device, the click-clack of her rapidly moving fingers, then the robotic voice. You don't need to keep doing all of this for me. I'm tired of all the appointments. It doesn't make a difference anyway, and it's not fair to you. Don't be ridiculous, Claire murmured, reaching her arm around Autumn's shoulders, then resting her cheek against the top of Autumn's head. If we fight, then there's a chance. If we don't try, then there's no chance. I try because you're worth it. I couldn't not try to get you diagnosed and treated. We can fail 1,000,000 times, and if we succeeded once, then it was worth it. Autumn pursed her lips, signing, Thank you. Now tell me about the thing with your phone that made you annoyed. Then she did her perfect impression of Claire looking at her phone with disdain. She let loose a snort and a small laugh. It's incredible that someone who cannot talk can be so gifted with impressions, but that's Autumn for you. Yeah, it was Kyle. He's just having a tough time. She raked her fingers through her hair, inhaling and exhaling a slow count. The day felt heavier now, but she was determined not to let it crush her. We'll figure something out, she said, though it sounded hollow in her own ears. A quiet meow startled them both. Don Roberto had crept in from the hallway, his big fluffy tail waving like a banner. Oh, hey, buddy, Claire murmured, forcing a small smile. Autumn signed. Cat is unimpressed, as they both exchanged sly grins. At least Don Roberto had impeccable timing. Later that evening, when Claire finally pulled herself together, she laid out the usual nighttime meds on a battered TV tray. Pregabalin, duloxetine, ibuprofen, acetaminophen, plus a liquid cough suppressant and ondansetron. Nothing fancy, just the same old routine. You know the drill. Autumn swallowed them dutifully, her expression resigned. Outside, the wind howled anew, rattling the windows. A small shiver coursed through her, but she chose to focus instead on Autumn's presence and the soft purr under her friend's hand. Yet, as she headed to her own room, Claire felt a sudden wave of static-like pressure in her ears, as though the air had thickened. She paused in the hallway, heart pounding. It passed in a second, leaving her with that all-too-familiar uneasy feeling, like something was just there out of sight. She shook her head, refusing to dwell on it, and moved forward.